The Institute of Internal Auditors presents All Things Internal Audit. In this episode, Pamela, Stroebel, Powers, and James Rose unpack the new Global Practice Guide, Developing an Internal Audit Strategy, created to support Standard 9.2 in the Global Internal Audit Standards. They discuss why strategy is essential for internal audit functions, how it differs from the audit plan, and the importance of foresight, scenario analysis, and continuous development. They also discuss the connection between strategy and performance measurement, and how these tools help internal auditors stay aligned with organizational objectives.
James, can you talk a little bit to our audience today about why it was so important to the Standards Board that we include this new standard on internal audit strategy?
So in terms of setting an internal audit strategy and just having that standard kind of goes back to the domain, managing the function, and then that core principle above it, act strategically. If we're not thinking about our strategy as a department, we can't continuously improve and we can't align what we're doing to the organization's overall strategy. At the end of the day, we're here to help the organization meet its strategic objectives. That's in the purpose of internal auditing. And so in order to align to that, we've got to have our own strategy. Plus, we go out and we audit everyone and say, what's your strategy? It's fair for them to turn around and ask us, what's our internal audit function strategy?
One of our goals when we developed this practice guide to help audit practitioners, specifically internal audit functions around developing their strategy, was we really wanted to specify how this was specific to developing a strategy for an internal audit function. Can you specify some of the aspects of the guide that you think help distinguish this guide specifically to an internal audit function versus just to an overall organization?
In terms of the internal audit strategy versus the large organization, our focus is on good governance. At the end of the day, the whole aspect of internal auditing is how do we help the organization have good or great governance? And so when you take that as a focus, our strategy gets into those components of good governance, our relationship with the board, with the audit committee, whatever the governing organization is, our relationship with management and management's expectations, and then our relationship to governance, risk, and control processes. And then, then into the heart of the strategy is how do we build up our audit function, the staff, our methodologies, our processes, and our communication in order to achieve what our role is in the organization, which is a component of the overall organization strategy and objectives. And so it's important for us to have our own strategy about how we're going to achieve that. What does good governance need to be in our organization, in our industry, in our sector, in our country or region? And then what does that in turn mean in terms of what we need to be building out? And there's a concept here that we're always under development. I mean, the organization is always under development. We as an audit function are always under development. And so what's the next thing that we need to either improve on or look out into the future in the next couple of years and say, we need to be ready for that because that's where the organization's going. And that's a component of our strategy that we're working on.
I love the concept of underdevelopment or always under development. I tend to focus on, and we'll talk maybe a little bit in a minute about performance measurement, but I always think about continuous improvement. How are we always trying to do better? So I love that concept, James. So an example of a way that we did try to modify what we gave you guidance in that might be a little bit different than you're expecting. So one of the typical components of an internal or a typical organization strategy you would be used to seeing is mission. What's the mission of the organization? Well, as James was talking about, as you were describing, James, we really want to align with the mission of the organization. That's what internal audit function is about. That's our primary objective. So we didn't need to repeat a mission. However, we would want to apply the purpose and most likely the purpose statement out of the standards, but maybe you have even a more specific purpose for your organization that you want to apply there. So although we gave you definitely a roadmap, we tried to give you some examples, some templates. We're really hoping that our audience sees fit to make it work for them. You mentioned the overarching principle, Principle 9, plan strategically. The next standard after strategy is around the internal audit plan. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two requirements, about the difference between a requirement for a strategy and a requirement for an internal audit plan? Strategy being a newer emphasis, internal audit plan being something we're used to that's been around for a long time.
The audit plan is just the how, or I'm sorry, the what we're going to do, the thing, the engagements that we're going to go execute. But in the day, you've got to roll that up into the bigger picture about, first off, what does that mean in terms of good governance for the organization? And so strategically, what's our role in terms of what the board expects? And how do we, develop the capabilities for the function to execute that overall, guidance back to the board and the actual engagements that support that guidance. And so, I'll give you an example. We knew that our organization it was in the healthcare space, was morphing it from more payer focused insurance type of rubric to more of an actual direct delivery rubric where we're actually hiring providers and other folks to drive, healthcare. And so the audit function had to start thinking about, well, if that's where the organization is going to be in a couple years, what type of staffing do we need? So we needed to hire nurses and other types of practitioners. And we weren't asked to do that at the time we were making that transition. A lot of folks in the executive leadership or maybe in the board may have been scratching their heads. Why is the audit department hiring nurses? But when we thought about good governance in the organization, providing the assurance model we needed to think out of the box in terms of where do we need to be. The other thing that we saw was the onslaught of more and more regulations and the complexity of trying to keep track of all that. So our audit group drove strategically introduction of a GRC platform and system to help tie together all the regulations and governance and risk management and controls, both to support that regulatory oversight, but also just our basic annual financial control reviews, which was getting very complex to manage on spreadsheets. So again, those are strategic initiatives of the organization from an HR domain, from a technology domain, which we needed to have, which had nothing to do with the audit plan. And so that's the distinction there. What are the capabilities that you're building strategically in order to meet your strategic goals with the board? And then your audit plan is just the list of engagements you're going to do and how they kind of tie together. So in our mind at the standards board, those are very easy to decipher two different components. And we just probably haven't talked as much to practitioners about that.
You also made some really good tie-in points there with some of the other elements of the standards and why the strategy becomes so important. And when we look at our purpose of internal auditing, we use the word foresight. And we've actually also gotten feedback about helping define foresight. And you just described it perfectly as you were beginning to answer that question for me. Looking forward, what's going to possibly be happening with the organization in the future? We're already used to looking at risk management and thinking about what could be happening. What are our future objectives? Where are we trying to go? And that by setting a strategy helps make sure that the internal audit function is following that purpose. And then you also brought up, I'm sure unintentionally, a couple of other standards that are near and dear to our heart in the 10 series, 10.2 and 10.3 around the internal audit function. Having a strategy helps us really think practically about what our human resources needs are, what our information technology needs are that help us do that planning and making sure that we're having those conversations with our board and all of that. So perfect tie-ins. Thank you, James. So James and you and I have had a really good time over the last quite a few years working together as part of the team that developed the standards and then moving on and working on both the performance measures tool as well as this strategy global practice guide. So we've gotten to know each other quite well. And we actually had a robust team on this project with 3 standards board members, as well as a couple of gentlemen from Germany that had gone through this really robust robust process of developing a strategy. So they sat and helped us on this team. One thing I learned about you, James, is your personal interest and passion around scenario analysis and how that can feed into strategy. So I was hoping to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about why you believe that's such an important tie-in to strategy.
To me, it's important because strategy, and this goes back way back to I was lucky enough to take a strategic management course at Chicago, University of Chicago, around developing corporate strategy. And the component there was, from the get go, they talked about how as the CEO developing the strategy, the bottom line is you're trying to predict the future. The job of the CEO is to predict the future and then to put in the capabilities to seize that future environment. That's no different for the internal audit function. Your job is actually to predict the future. We know that we're not perfect at predicting the future, right? So, what we can do, since we know we can't definitively predict the future, is you can say, but I know with some degree of confidence that one of a couple of things are going to happen. We're going to go in this direction or maybe a little bit to the left or the right. These are, scenarios. And so the perfect strategy is where you sit down and you think about, okay, the next 5 years, here are the top 2, 3, 4, 5 things that could potentially happen. Those are your scenarios. And then you lay those down and say, okay, if I want to excel as an internal audit function in all 5 of those scenarios, what's the best possible initiatives I can put in place? Now, I may not be able to have the resources to deal with all of them, but what's the one that, like in my earlier example, nursing, a nurse practitioner. If we ended up not going into more, direct clinical care, I could have figured out how to use those nurses on insurance, reviews or claims reviews or other things. As it turned out, because we saw where the organization could potentially go and had those folks in place, the next year, we immediately got tagged to help with something only a clinician could do. I had this brand new nurse, been with us for about a year, sitting across from VPs, telling them what was in and out in terms of their budget based on, our auditing for a specific regulatory requirement in the U.S. jurisdiction. And so that was where, because we had that scenario analysis in place, we took a gamble. Everything is a gamble when you're looking forward, to go ahead and hire a nurse, and we figure out how to use them because we didn't exactly know what we were going to do. That we were in this perfect spot to be able to add value to the organization because of that nurse sitting in our independent audit function. That the controller felt very comfortable letting us, make sure that we were helping audit what needed to be done for management. So that's just one, example. And so you can think about any organization, they don't know exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So you lay out, where does and this goes back to where we start out with the corporate strategy versus internal audit function. So you have to kind of apply your thinking to the corporation overall, or I say just corporation, it could be a public entity, whatever the case is, to your overall organization. And then think about, okay, if the organizations go in these potential 3 or 4 areas, then how is the audit function? What are the 3 or 4 areas we need to go into? And then what's the best option in terms of our initiatives using the resources that we have? And that's also, one of the other standards about communicating to the board. This may be where you go to the board and say, these are the 5 best scenarios I'm hearing you all say about where the organization may go. I got 2 and 3 covered, but these other 2, I don't have squat to help you there unless we change something in the budget. I go hire somebody different, where the case may be. And so it also sets up a good conversation so you don't get surprised or surprise your board when, a year down the road, they go in a direction as an organization, you're caught flat-footed because you can't really provide assurance in that space because you don't have the talent. Back to your use of the word foresight and pointing out in the purpose of internal auditing, that was probably the only and the biggest significant change we made by adding foresight to the purpose. And the idea is that the internal audit function is about predicting the future in terms of our governance, risk, and control model and how well we're going to apply and be able to apply good governance in that space. So there, that's a long-winded answer to why scenario analysis is important, but how it ties in foresight in terms of the purpose and strategy in terms of all the things we need to do to be sure we're ready to provide what the organization at times may not even itself quite understand what it's going to need down the road.
Absolutely. Wouldn't it be nice though, James, if we had a nice internal audit crystal ball and we could just set that up and look and be
Right,
able to
right,
tell our organization, here's what's coming?
right, wouldn't it?
Yes. Somebody should invent that. That seems like AI. It seems like that's our next step, right? So maybe.
Right, right, yeah.
Excellent. So before we wrap up our conversation today, I would like to talk a little bit about, I alluded to, so James, you and I worked together prior to the Strategy Global Practice Guide. We also worked on and issued another tool, the other standard that was quote unquote new, a leading practice that many internal audit functions did, but it wasn't required in the standards, is 12.2 performance measurement. So since you were on both teams, I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit today about how might an internal audit function use both this developing an internal audit strategy global practice guide and that performance measure tool. How are they aligned so that they can use that to effectively both set their strategy and measure their progress towards it?
Well, I mean, if you set the strategy, here's our scenarios down the road. And so here's our initiatives to get there. So you've got to, when I think about initiatives, we can easily get stuck into putting forth initiatives, which is the standard, what percentage of the audit plan am I going to get done? Or, what type of staff am I going to hire? As opposed to the more strategic initiatives around what's our overall audit coverage or how do we achieve the mandate type of thing. So once we think about the initiatives, then we want to measure those initiatives. And that's where performance measures come in place, both forward looking and rear view looking performance measures. And so they're performance measures that can be, ones that are they're truly expected to hit, and there can be aspirational and performance measures. And so we need to be clear about the distinction between the two. I hate when folks say, "Well, we don't want to put that performance measure out there because we might not be able to meet it." Well, no, that it's still directionally correct. We don't have to like weigh our entire bonus on that measure. Yeah, that measure. So that's one of the other things we were clear in the guidance in 12.2 is that there's some measures that may be the core ones that actually get into your bonus plan that actually get reported to the board, and there's some that may be internal to just your function that are more aspirational. And if you look up in the consideration section in 12.2, right off the top, the two they were actually put in order in a very purposeful way. The first one is coverage of engagement objectives expected to be reviewed according to the internal audit mandate. So what does the board expect you to do, the overall mandate? And so we should have performance measures around achieving those. And our strategy and initiatives are around making sure we've got all the resources in place and talent to do that. And then the second one is more aspirational. The extent to which the internal audit conclusions at the level of the business unit organization address significant objectives in the organization. The idea there is that it is a comprehensive opinion on all the material risks of the organization and whether they're well managed, yes or no. There are not a lot of audit functions that are at that level today. Some are doing financial, some are doing a slice of compliance. No one's giving a comprehensive assessment on governance across objectives, financial compliance, financial goals, customer goals. That's your aspirational, driver. And that's purposefully listed as the number two, measure in the consideration section of the standard. And so then you bring that back to our strategy conversation here. That's why it's important that we tie the strategy in the organization and understand what the overall objectives of the organization are back to how we can provide a comprehensive opinion to the organization. I mean, that's the aspirational performance measure there is how can we give a comprehensive opinion? And there's so many internal audit organizations which aren't really doing that. And they're focused on the financial controls or a slice of compliance. And we really want aspirationally to look at the overall risk to organization. So how can we provide that comprehensive, opinion? And so That's an aspirational performance measure, which ties into our aspirational strategy looking forward. And so that's how those tie in, from my perspective, at least. And so again, to summarize, performance measures kind of are the end tag to where our strategy is going and what those initiatives are. There's some performance measures that you're expected to hit because they're in your bonus or what the board expects. There's some performance measures that are aspirational, and that's fine too. And so those are more directionally. You want to keep moving, forward on those. But some years you may get a step back. Other years, a couple of steps forward. That's fine too.
In the government, it's less of a bonus and more of a pat on the back. But yes,
Right, right. Sure. Exactly. As the case may be. Yeah. Yeah. We've got our yin and the yang here. Pam's the public sector first, and I'm kind of the more private sector, even though I've done a lot of public sector work. But yeah, she keeps me in check here. Because we've got a global audience. And so all these concepts apply: public sector, industry, any country. I mean, that's what I love about the Institute of Internal Auditors and our standards. They're developed to fit any organization on the planet. So it's just a matter of stepping back and understanding the context and then applying them correctly.
absolutely. You made the point again in that going back to your response when we very first started this discussion on thinking about underdevelopment or continuous improvement. That's really what performance measurement is about. It shouldn't just, if you're all reporting green, like you've made all of your performance measure targets, you're not pushing yourself. And the idea of the strategy is to help. I loved your aspirational, get aspirational, be excited about what's to come. Great. So I really, really appreciate your time and being here with me today, James. I do just want to wrap up and make sure that we mention again, we do have that new internal audit strategy global practice guide that is out there for our members. We're hoping as part of the IPPF that helps you specifically with standard 9.2. We also have 3 companion tools with that. We have a template that we really recommend that's really if your organization does not have its own strategic plan already, we recommend that you use the same format that they use so that it feels to them like it's part of their organization. When you're working with your board and your management, you don't want it to feel like this is this foreign thing that internal audit is doing. No, this is part of our organization. But if you don't have a template, if your organization doesn't have something, we've provided one for you, as well as case studies that are specific to developing an internal audit strategy in an example financial services organization and an example public sector organization. So we're hoping that those tools help you out, as well as we also mentioned the performance measurement tool, which just has James gave you several examples, but it has lots of performance measures you can pick from or use to develop your own. These are just a starting point. They're to help you get started. If you have interest in specifically maybe what James, as you shared about scenario analysis, if people want more on that, we encourage you to do your own research. There's lots and lots and lots of information out there on developing a strategy. So go out there, see how you can apply even more of that to continuously improve and develop your internal audit function strategy. So thanks again, James, and a shout out to the other task force members that worked with us on both of these tools. We appreciate everything that you and especially the standards board members do for our profession.
Fraud is getting trickier, but you can stay ahead. Join us online for the 2026 Fraud Unmasked virtual conference on February 17th. It's one packed day of practical tips, expert insights, and 13 plus CPEs. So save your spot today and register at the IIA.org. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate us. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch other episodes on YouTube or at the IIA.org. That's THEIIA.org.